The first billboard was like the beginning of the next season. On the video to my left, I turned left first, I'm sorry. I saw a grocery store with armed soldiers standing guard out front. And there were people waiting in line to go into these grocery stores, and then they were being checked out of the building on the other side. 5 at a time. So 5 people went in, and then 5 people came out, 5 more people went in. So they were keeping track of what was going on. After 5 people would go in, the others in line had to wait until 5 people came out on the other side. And then these soldiers would go through each bag as they left the building. And what was in the bags was recorded. They took a notebook and they were writing. They were actually recording them in a bright orange notebook. That stood out. The notebook they were writing in was orange. The people were all wearing coats and gloves and hats, and I could see their breath, so it was cold. And I kind of sensed that the food indicated bread, or the word of the Lord. There was a famine for the word of the Lord, we're told by the prophets. And the winter season was a season of trial, persecution, but a lot also because there was coldness of heart, a lot of coldness of heart in the situation. Once again, look beyond the natural things in this dream and see the spiritual sides. People were cold, they were in line, they had to wait, and then what they came out with was looked at and recorded. The second billboard I saw the video to my immediate right. And so this next one has to do with discerning the coldness and the effects of the coldness of the heart in our lives. I saw the video to my immediate right, and it showed people in a green van marked coroner in blue letters, outlined in white. And they pulled up to a house with a large X, red X on the door, and the number 2. Now, number 1's already happened, but number 2, this is like the second scene. So people are dying spiritually, in the sense. There's a wave of deaths that are coming. There was about 2 to 3 inches of snow on the ground, and the windows of the house were iced over. We couldn't see it because of the ice. The van had a sticker on the front windshield that said Minnesota, Wisconsin Response Team. So it's a spiritually cold region, and there are natural events happening here. But at the same point, we're about to see there's a coldness of heart. There were 4 people that stepped out of the van, and they were wearing heavy coats. And once again, the number 4 pertains to worldly events, seasons, or worldly happenings. These people stepped out of the van. They were wearing heavy coats and gloves, and the gloves were taped. They were taped to their jackets so they wouldn't come off, and no air could get into the gloves. They were also wearing very, very woolish hats. Two bodies were brought out of this house, and these bodies appeared to be in the fetal position, and they were so blue that it appeared to me they'd been frozen solid. So in other words, they died of worldly exposure. They died of exposure to the elements. I don't know whether electricity had gone out, if it was just cold. We know that there's power shortages and outages that are predicted for the coming winter, but nonetheless, these 2 people that came, they brought out 2 bodies. 2 is a number for discernment. 2 means double, so dividing things. So we had to understand that these 2 people, the 2 bodies that were brought out in the fetal position, they literally had frozen to death. There was worldly exposure that had impacted their life. So the first billboard showed people in and out trying to get groceries, and they were lined up. They had to wait. They had, there was some discernment of the things that were happening. And the next video on my left. So left, right, left. The next video on my left showed a reporter saying the East and West Coast were now under the management of FEMA due to inclement weather patterns that had destroyed some major interstates and roads. So there were shutdowns, there were disasters that had happened, there were tragedies. And these things were caused by the groaning of the earth, and also because of the coldness of believers. Really believe that, and it'll make more sense as I get through it. People were advised to stay home until further notice. Gas stations had been shut down by an executive order, and martial law had been declared in most major cities, over 25,000. That was the number that I saw or heard on the video. I noticed there were also no fires, nobody rioting, no looting, but there was this rain, sleet mix that was everywhere when I saw the damage. And also what appeared to be damage from tornadoes. So there had been tornadoes or something. There were houses and vehicles looked like they'd been shattered and thrown around like toys. So in other words, there had been extreme weather conditions, weather patterns, rain and snow, all sorts of other things that were going on. But these things have been so they were shut down. There were disasters, tragedies. The earth was groaning. We'd seen people frozen to death. We'd seen people waiting in line to get food. So there were shortages. There was a lot of things that were happening. But the coldness and the wetness and the dampness of the season was obvious. Number 4, the final billboard on the right showed a small church with people praying. But the room was cold and it was dark, and they were huddled in their seats and they were shivering. And this seems to me, as what I was watching, could have been the reason for the events. A worldly and cold Christians, people who were at the church, that there should have been fire in their hearts and there was nothing. They were just cold. And then the man that I see walked in, and he asked loudly, he walked in the front door and he asked loudly, "Where is the fire?" in a tone like that. Where is the fire? And at this statement, these 10 people, the 10 specific people turned around. I'm reminded of the parable of the 10 virgins. These 10 people they were praying while seated. They covered their faces in shame. Some brought their shirts up like this, their hoodies. Some pulled their hats down, but they all turned away from the man who was speaking. He said, "Where's the fire?" And after he said that and they turned away, he said, "Look at me and stand." And they did so. And he put his right hand in the air and he said loudly, "Where are the Pentecostals full of fire and spirit and faith? And why are you sitting coldly and idly by while the world freezes without your fire?" In other words, these 10 people had no oil in their lamps. They weren't prepared for his return. They weren't prepared to share the gospel ministry. They weren't telling people, "Hey, the wedding of the bride is about to take place. Where are you? And what are you doing?" And then he says to them, "Give them fire and give them food. And stop having the appearance of Pentecostals while you deny the power that you should walk in." He then opened his right hand and a flame appeared, and then he blew and the embers went to swirling in the air and came down on all their heads. He will send his spirit out. He will send his spirit out to ignite people that are praying if we want the fire. Some of the fire seemed to be a light to a sheen of oil, and then the fire spread to their hearts. It started here and it moved down to their hearts after it had come down on their heads. Some of the fire, once again, seemed like a sheen of oil. It spread to their hearts, and it roared out of their chest with a loud noise. It was not quiet, almost like the day of Pentecost experience. I could see like fire coming out of their chest. It wasn't hurting them or burning through. It was just coming out of their heart area. And there was a noise with it, like a rushing wind type sound, like fire makes. 5 of the believers with their hearts on fire headed towards the door and out into the streets, and there was smoke trailing behind them like a pillar. And the other 5 had heads that were on fire, but nothing had reached their hearts. So 5 of these people have fire that lands here. It goes all the way to their heart, and then it sends them out the door in the streets. And 5 of them, they had their heads were on fire, but it didn't go any further because there was no oil, there was no influence, no spirit, no power, no fire in their hearts to get them to do something. And they've been praying quietly in a cold room, in a dark place, not full of the fire of God. And the fire had not reached his heart, the man spoke and he said, "You might as well stay here as you have nothing burning in your hearts and therefore nothing to share."